really very happy to see such a big crowd of entrepreneurial Estonian friends here. As you know, Estonia is a very tiny country, but compact in the northern Europe, or Scandinavia, Nordics as it is called nowadays. We do share some Viking history together, some very tough Viking history, and nowadays our businesses and economies are very connected and integrated, are they in IT, electronics, banking, or timber, or whatever. And last but not least, Estonia is also a, how to say, oil-producing country, but we are much tougher than our Norway friends or neighbors, because we get the oil out of the stove, so we just press it hard. We don't pump it out of the ground. Anyway, coming back to today's event, what is it about Estonia with an obscure language and unenviable weather? As you can see here on the picture, we do have winters in Estonia, but surprisingly right now I think it's even warmer back in Estonia, in Tallinn, than actually here in the valley. But anyway, we do produce the biggest number of startups per capita, and today we want to share these views and these experiences that we have. Actually, it was almost or exactly 6 years ago when we started here, when Enterprise Estonia started here, and since then we have had a growing trend of startups coming from Estonia to have some study visits or already setting up themselves here. And of course today we are happy to present some of the success stories. But before getting to our event, I would like to give a word to Said Amidi, who is the CEO and the president of Plug and Play Center, where we are. And actually this is also a home for Enterprise Estonia Silicon Valley, and it's a fantastic place for startups.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to welcome you. I remember we had President of Estonia here about 2 years ago. And after we spent a couple of hours together, he said, Said, I only want one Skype per year. Can you please arrange that from Estonia? So I hope we can do that, one Skype per year. But I just wanted to welcome you and to tell you that we are really excited at Plug and Play to invest in companies in Europe and then help them get connected in US and grow. So these last 12 months, we have done 20 investments in Europe. We have a Berlin office with Axel Springer that we did 8 investments in the last 2 months. And we have a Spanish office that we have done 17 investments in Spain and neighboring countries like Portugal. So first I wanted to welcome you, and other than sort of helping Innovation Estonia have a little office here and work with them, our main goal is to find the best entrepreneur, the best companies, invest in them, and then help them to grow in US. So I hope, like we did Axel Springer joint venture in Estonia, I mean in Berlin. We did Globe, which is a telco in Philippines. We did 10 companies with them, and we'd love to find even a partner in Estonia, either a media company or a telco, to do a little plug and play. Because the quality of the talent, the startups I have seen in Estonia, they are great. Again, I just wanted to welcome you, and I hope you have a great day here. And if I can be of any help, please let me know.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Said, and now it's my pleasure to introduce Steve Jurvetson for the keynote. I believe that we don't need a long introduction here, as Steve is very known in the Silicon Valley community as one of the very successful and good speaker. And of course, Steve was involved in Skype early days, was one of the investors, and now the star investments include Tesla and SpaceX. So please, Steve, the floor is yours. And actually, one more thing, if nobody knows, that Steve is actually Estonian by roots, and his both parents are Estonians. So I just wanted to push on the Estonian side as well.
Thank you, like that. So let's see, maybe if I stand up here, you can see me better. And,
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, thanks for coming, everyone. Welcome, certainly to the Estonians I see in the audience, as well as anyone who's feeling Estonian, as we like to say. We are a very welcoming country. We've had a lot of immigrants throughout our history, so just about everyone in Europe has probably some connection to Estonia, especially defense. So what I'd like to talk about today is an introduction in a very general sense that only indirectly speaks to Estonia, but speaks more generally to the topic of technology change and innovation, and why it is, perhaps I'll provide a framework for why it is that small companies and small countries have opportunities like never before. Why these are some of the brightest times in the next few years and going forward for the new entrant, for someone who isn't an incumbent, for someone who is trying something new and disruptive. And I think that will lay the framework for the specific examples to see throughout the day. As you know, I work with venture capital, so caveat is everything I'm about to share with you is something I've learned from startups. And if I've added any value whatsoever, it's just trying to find a pattern in the data points that point all in the same direction. And from our vantage point, point to a very bright future. And I'll scatter some photos I've taken along the way. This, of course, is the old town, which I highly encourage you to visit. Beautiful place. So, innovation. Here, the backdrop picture is the Christmas card from the president of the school we hearing from. I love the nod to the new from the old here in the teacup. So, innovation is obviously very important, right? Without this, venture capital wouldn't exist, entrepreneurs wouldn't exist, they would get bigger and spaces and stagnation rule. So, how is it that we have innovation? And I'll pose a thought experiment, if you may. If you can try just for a moment to pick what you think will be the most important company 20 years from now. And this is a very difficult exercise, but try to pick a company that you think will be the most important company 20 years from now, defined as they're doing meaningful change to better the planet, the kinds of companies that history books will be written about, that everyone will be talking about, and you feel are literally sculpting the fabric of society. So try to pick one. And if you do have a pen, write it down, because I'd love to follow up 20 years later, which is hard to do if you don't write it down, certainly not remember. Because I'm willing to bet 10 to 1 odds in your favor that everyone in the room is wrong. Pretty cheeky and bold bet, since I don't know what you wrote down. The only way I could possibly win that bet is if no one could be right. And the reason I believe that so strongly is I believe the most important company 20 years from now does not exist today, therefore does not have a name, and you could not write it down, nor could I. And it's that bet on the future that feels so very odd when you look to the look forward, but it's so obvious when you look to the past. So 20 years in the past, there was no Google, there was no Facebook. Apple was a near-dead company where when Steve Jobs returned to Apple, Michael Dell said the best thing he'd do is give the money back to shareholders and shut it down. And he wasn't just being cagey, he actually thought that's the best thing Apple could do with its cash. Think how much has changed in the past 20 years. There's no internet, really, in a consumer sense. It's just a research project. Okay. So if innovation is what drives meaningful change, where does it come from? Why does a new entrant, a new economy like Estonia, a new company like any startup in Silicon Valley ever have a chance to succeed? Right? And I don't know what you assume the success rate is, whether it's 1%, 10%, 50% in some non-tech businesses. Why is it not zero, right? If you have no money, no brand, no presence, no channel distribution power, no one knows who you are, and obviously we know that by existence proofs this happens all around us, but what is it? What is it that makes that innovation possible? And it almost always revolves around some disruption in the market. Before I explain disruption, these photos are now distracting more than helping. This is a photo from 1944 on the left, my dad and his horse Pew. I'm not sure if he's here right now, but he married my mom, who's also named Pew. That's kind of bizarre, I don't know what that means. That shows you Estonia just 69 years ago, in 1944 on the right. And a wonderful movie, if you haven't seen it, about massive change and disruption that occurred very peacefully in Estonia when it came out from under the Iron Curtain and helped catalyze the dissolution of the Soviet Union. An amazing story, not many people know about, so for the non-Estonians in the room, you can get this on Netflix. Check it out. So, disruption in general, though, is bad for the old, good for the new. And it comes from a variety of places. So, a good financial collapse, that's a wonderful source of disruption. So, in 2008, what were the headlines about? Automotive industry on the ropes in the United States. Financial services sector, totally decimated, right? Major loans and bailouts and all this. Within our portfolio, the automotive and financial services startups were thriving. So imagine you're trying to start a car company. You couldn't have asked for a better script than GM's going bankrupt. Right? I mean, you couldn't, if you wrote in advance, if Elon Musk said, here's what might play out, no one would have believed it. Right? Oh, we'll be able to buy a multi-billion-dollar facility here in Silicon Valley, the only automotive plant in the area that we kind of want, for $42 million, and it has over $1 billion of equipment there for us that we need. Unbelievable, right? So new entrants love disruption. It can come from privatization of an industry, like Poland and a lot of Eastern European economies saw a while back. Sporadic, temporal, scattered around the planet. It can come from deregulation, which changes the rules of the game in certain energy and clean tech markets, and then new entrants will flock to that. So again, what's the pattern here? Things that disrupt the rules of the game. One other big category is when you're getting a new channel of distribution to a customer. So they've got the internet and now mobile phones. It's a new way to reach customers. So just like Amazon versus Barnes & Noble, the story everyone knows. Whenever you have a new channel to reach a customer, it can change the rules of the game, the pricing policies. Does a product become a service like a Hotmail, Skype, what have you? And mobility is the obvious current one, right? So internet's still important, mobile phones the next wave. And just as a reminder, by most forecasts, within the next 7 years, 2 to 3 billion people, and I believe closer to 3 billion, are going to come online for the first time. So they are currently out of the global dialogue. They are currently not customers we could reach with web services or products. They're coming online via very inexpensive iPhone or iPad-like products. They won't, of course, be iPhones or iPads. They'll be no-name products from other vendors. These minds are going to contribute an immense amount to the global collective of knowledge, intelligence, and potential consumers. So it's going to be a big deal, all right? And that's what most of the venture community is rallying around right now, is investment for mobile social wealth. They like to make that acronyms. So I don't follow that so much, but that's worthwhile watching, and my guess is many Estonian and other entrepreneurs around the world are going to be focusing on that stuff. The problem is I can't tell you what the next one is. Right? So I can't tell you with confidence that 20 years from now, we're going to have a new channel of distribution to the customer beyond mobile phones that's going to be our major investment thesis. It might. I don't think it's Google Glass or these work things in front of your eyes. That might be the next thing, but I'm just not a big believer in that. And if anyone has ideas later, I'd be curious what that might be. So I've saved the best for last. There's all that massive build-up to, well, okay, all those are interesting and sporadic and periodic. Why would we expect entrepreneurship to continue forever? Why would I have a job for the next 50 years? I think given life extension, I expect at least about 50 years doing investments. And it's disruption from accelerating technological change. This is the Uber category that goes back in time and in the future, and I'll show you a couple graphs in a moment. It's something you can really bet on. And what I'm referring to is anything that's a nonlinear accelerating pace of change, right? Think of a curve going up into the sky. Human brains have a really hard time projecting a curve, right? What we do as scientists is put on a log paper so that curve becomes a straight line, and then we can forecast the future in ways that we would never believe if we put it on a curve or on a graph paper, like Moore's Law or things like that. That piecewise linear business strategy thing explains a lot of disruption, like Sony losing the portable music franchise to Apple when disk drive and storage costs dropped through predictable funds. It was like the writing was on the wall. The digital music should take over. New entrants benefit from those disruptions. So, I alluded to Moore's Law. Here's a photo I took of him just that way across the bay, where he grew up in Pescadero and salmon fishing. Wonderful fish to be caught out there. And I've spoken to him a bit, and I can tell you without doubt, he never really imagined what everyone thinks of as Moore's Law. And what he wrote about in 1965 is a very geeky y-axis. I'm going to try to read it. It's a small read. It was very specific. Intel's optimization of how big a die you should cut from a wafer. So if a wafer is at a certain size, a certain scattering of dust particles on it, what would be the ideal way to chop it up? It's essentially what he's plotting. But what was amazing is, and you don't normally see this, is this 5 data points and then this dotted line that just kind of goes off and begs the question, why? And he didn't really talk about it there. He just took the graph and said dotted line, off 5 data points. Carver Mead called it Moore's Law. Everyone thinks of it in a different way, but it's like a computer's kind of double in power every year or so. That's what people have the popular perception of what he meant. But I would argue that what he was observing, even though at the time everyone thought it was a very special, magical thing about integrated circuits, and Microcosm by George Gilder, another book said this is unlike anything in history because it gets better, faster, cheaper as you miniaturize. And this is so special to integrate circuits. When I grew up, that's what my father did for a living, made memory chips. And it was the common wisdom that this is unlike any predecessor technology. But I would argue that what Gordon Moore was observing was actually a refraction of a much more important, longer-term trend going back over 100 years that has nothing to do with integrated circuits.